I've heard of He's got that level.
Why not?
He's checking the levels. So is the mic working? Is it working? A little louder? How's that working back there? Okay. Well, hello everybody. Thanks for coming out. A couple things before we start. Nearing the end of the tour. And that's good news and bad news for you. The bad news is I've been in too many airplanes and I've shaken too many hands, and I've got this train wreck of a cold coming on all of a sudden. So I may forget, but you please don't shake my hand tonight. Trust me on this. You don't want this. The good news for you is I've taken some cold medicine. It usually loops me, so I'll probably say some really embarrassing things tonight. Talk about tomorrow. That'll be pretty good. Okay, so Gauntlegrim. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you just an update on what's going on with me, kind of like an FAQ, you know, and what I'm working on, what's coming out, and what these books are all about. And then we'll get to questions, because that's more fun for me to ask questions, okay? Something occurred to me, and what I want to tell you a little bit about is a journey I've been on, and I don't mean the book tour. When I was writing the Transition series, which preceded Gauntlegrim, these are characters I've been with since 1987. You know, it occurred to me also that most people who come to my books now and pick up like the Crystal Shard or Homeland are much younger than the book. Which is really cool. Even college kids pick up Homeland, they're younger than the book. But the other thing that really occurred to me now, because with Transitions and Gauntlegrim, I'm writing these books in a shared world. And the publishers have done some things to the world. And they forced pressure on the authors to really adapt what we've been doing to fit this big time jump in the world. I was very resistant to that at first. Nobody likes change. But it made me think of the books in a different way. And what I've really been doing for the last 23 years, I realized, is taking a personal journey and letting you look in on it. I've come to understand that the characters I write in books, and I think this is true of most authors, I don't know how many actually understand this, but the characters I'm writing in the books are really nothing more than vehicles for me to ask myself the questions of life that we all deal with. Whether it's, you know, the meaning of love, the meaning of why we're here, what comes after. All of those questions. These characters are my way of asking myself those questions. I haven't found any answers yet, but still it's kind of nice to be able to ask the questions. So, as I put the pressure on Drizzt now, through these last 3 books and now this one, Gauntlegrim, and it's the first book of the Neverwinter trilogy, but I really consider it almost like the 4th book of the Transitions trilogy, because it really ties up the changes and moves us forward. And as I've been doing this, what I've come to realize is Drizzt, for all of his life pretty much, Crystal Shard on, had surrounded himself with some pretty stable characters. Maybe it was a response to the craziness of his childhood in that really awful place of Menzoberranzan. But if you look at the characters that were around him, Drizzt, Bruenor, Catti-brie, Regis, and Wulfgar, the 5 of them, all 5 of them, are very solid and dependable. They would save your life at the cost of their own. They were loyal, they were friends, real true friends. But what would happen to Drizzt now? If I start surrounding him with characters who maybe aren't quite that savory and dependable and solid, will they pull him toward their way of thinking, or will he pull them toward his way of thinking? So again, what I'm doing is I'm exploring in these books I'm exploring my own belief system, my own feelings about things, my own friendships. And it's really, as I think of it that way, it becomes so much more fun for me to write the books. So that's Gauntlet Room. The next book is Neverwinter Wood. It'll be out, I'm about half done, a little more than half done. It'll be out next year around this time. Then there'll be another one after that. This is called the Neverwinter Trilogy, and the reason it's called the Neverwinter Trilogy is because next year Cryptic is releasing Neverwinter Nights 3, the computer game, for those of you who play Neverwinter Nights. And now I'm not writing the story for Neverwinter Nights in these books or anything like that. What I'm really doing is had a meeting with the folks from Cryptic and the folks from Wizards, and there are things they want me to do in the books to leave the place in certain condition for the game designers. So I know what they're doing, they know what I'm doing, so that this is how shared world works. We're trying not to step on each other's toes, okay? And they had some things, they asked me if I could do these things in the book. That's not telling me what to write in the book. I knew the story I wanted to tell. This is more like little side stories and kind of the icing on the cake of the book itself. And a lot of it seemed pretty fun to me, like blowing things up, so I was all for it. So we jumped right in and did that. That's the Neverwinter Trilogy. Look forward over the next couple of years. Also, this year, a couple of months ago, a book came out called The Bear. For those of you who don't know about this series, I wrote a world back in the mid-90s called Demon Wars. And it's a 7-book series, some of the best work I've ever done. I'm sure of that, including the 4th book, Mortalis, which is my favorite book ever. In the 7-book series, I created this world. It was my Forgotten Realms, my Shannara, my Middle-earth. And my plan was to do these big books, and those are big books. They're twice, many, many named characters, many, many storylines, and create the world with those books. And then go back to the world later and do smaller, more personal stories, like the Drizzt books, which they don't really define the world, they just take you on this personal journey. And so I did. A few years ago, I went back and I wrote a book called The Highwayman. And The Highwayman is one of my favorite books as well, because the character, the hero, is so unique. And he's got such a stilted perspective of the world, if you will. And then I went back and I wrote 3 books to follow that up to finish his story, because I realized he had a question he needed answered. And it took me 4 books to get there. So it was The Highwayman, The Ancient, The Dame, and then The Bear, which just came out. And if you like the Drizzt books, I'm pretty sure you'll love The Highwayman. The other thing this year that's finishing up is next month, the 3rd book in the Stone of Tomorrow series is coming out. I wrote these books with my son Gino, and it was a blast. These books take place around the time of the Halfling's Gem. Drizzt is in it, the whole crew is in it. And we've got 2 new characters that Gino created, and he's telling their story, and the background of these stories is the events of the Halfling's Gem and the Legacy, that time frame. And I got to rewrite some of my favorite scenes in the books, like in the Halfling's Gem, there's one scene with this, picture a dwarf on a flaming chariot and pirate ships. It's not a good combination for the pirates. I got to rewrite that scene from a different perspective. It was very, very cool. So that's The Stowaway was that book, then The Shadow Mask, and now The Sentinels is coming out in November to finish up that trilogy. And that's it for those characters, for now, at least. Next year I've got 2 new things coming. One trip down memory lane and the continuation of this series. One of the new things is I just signed on to do a 6-book comic series, New Adventures with Drizzt Do'Urden, following the end of Gauntlet Rim. A little side street I wasn't going to get to explore in the next book, and I thought would be really great for a graphic novel. So Gino and I are actually writing those. So that'll be sometime late spring, early summer next year. 6-book series, comic series about New Adventures of Drizzt. The other new thing next year, it's actually not that new for those of you who've been following what I've been working on. 4 years ago, in August, I was sitting at home actually doing an e-signing from my website. The phone rings. And I answer the phone, and the guy on the other end says, "Can I talk to Bob Salvatore?" I said, "Speaking." And he said, "Oh man, I can't believe I'm talking to you. You're like my favorite author. This is Kurt Schilling." I'm a Red Sox fan. This is Kurt Schilling, the bloody sock pitcher, World Series guy. So I'm like, yeah, right. But my wife was laughing at me because his publicist had called earlier, and it really was Kurt. So, as soon as I finally figured out it really was Kurt, I'm like, oh, I can't believe I'm talking to you. And he's like, oh, I can't believe I'm talking to you. And I'm like, oh, I can't believe I'm talking to you. We went like 20 minutes back and forth like that. What Kurt said to me is that he was getting near the end of his career. It was 2006. He wound up retiring in 2008. And he didn't want to go sell used cars or insurance. He wanted to do something he loved. And what Kurt loves more than anything else, other than baseball and his family, are video games. And he was a hardcore EverQuest player. And now he's a hardcore World of Warcraft player. And everything else you can name. Every time I go see him, he's playing video games. It's his thing. So Kurt wanted to start a company and build a massive multiplayer online role-playing game built by people who love games. And he asked me to come in and be his creative director and create a world for him. And if that wasn't enough, he turned around and, for art director, got a guy you may have heard of. His name's Todd McFarlane.
Holy.
And Todd's our art director. I'm the creative director. I put my team together, my old Seven Swords team, including both of my sons and Mike Ledger, who now works at the company. And we built a world, a fantasy world, high fantasy world, and 10,000-year history to it. All the races are defined, the way they interact economically, socially, all the structures. We put all the structures in place for this world. And we have proceeded over the last 4 years. We now have 150 people working in Maynard, Massachusetts. We have taken Blackguard and Moorguard from Sony, if you know those names. They were community guys. We have taken the UI director from Blizzard, the server guy from Blizzard. We have stolen some of the best people from some of the best and biggest video game companies around. CTO from EA, just some amazing, amazing people have come in. We got the mechanics designer who basically saved EverQuest 2 when he went in and redid the systems in EQ2. And we've got his boss as well, who now works for him. But the way we're getting people in is really simple. We're calling these people and we're saying, well, we've got some constraints. You know, you've got time and money constraints. There's no way to get around that when you're making something that's going to cost about $100 million. But we're building a game for gamers. We want you to come in and make the best game you can make. So like when we got the UI director in from Blizzard, we didn't tell her, here's what we want you to do. We said, you've been doing this for a lot of years. What is your dream UI? And then she said, I did something I've wanted to try for a long, long time. And we said, well, do it. And she's doing it. It is amazing. This is what we're doing. And we've hired in some really good folks. And about a year and a half ago, we bought a company out of Baltimore called Big Huge Games. Big Huge Games was known for Rise of Nations and Catan. They were a real-time strategy game company, but they were building an engine to do role-playing games, an RPG engine, open world role-playing games. And so what they did is they had gone out and hired away from Bethesda a guy named Ken Ralston and Mark Nelson. Now, I don't know if you know the names, but if you're video gamers, you've probably heard of their two last products, Elder Scrolls Morrowind and Oblivion. These are our lead designers in Big Huge Games. And Big Huge Games was coming up on the chopping block from the company that owned them because, you know, the recession and everything, and we grabbed them. And they had this great engine they were building, and we have what we think is a great IP, an intellectual property to give to them. And we married the two together. So the first product coming from us next year will be a single-player RPG for the PS3, the Xbox, and the PC called Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. And if you go to 38studios.com or reckoningthegame.com, you can see the first trailer that Todd McFarlane directed. And I just wrote the second trailer. I didn't even do the first trailer.